These horrifically abused and traumatized children, resecured from where they were being hidden by the traffickers in America, resecured, brought to safety by Trump's administration, reconnected with their family in Guatemala, arrangements made to return them at last to their homes. And this piece of human trash orders them deported from the flights they were on. Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkle Sugnanans also said, I have conflicting narratives from both sides here. It doesn't quite line up with what I'm getting from the government. Well, if there's one thing we know for sure, if progressives' mouths are moving, if these immigration advocates' mouths are moving, they're lying. It's all they do. If progressives didn't have lies to tell, they would have nothing to say at all. This past weekend, this unelected black-robed tyrannical, inferior district, trial, court, judge, a citizen of Trinidad Tobago, summarily prohibited President Trump from keeping his commitment to Guatemala to return 600 of their child nationals to them. Indeed, rather than allow these 600 children to be returned to their families in Guatemala, as the children themselves, their families, and the U.S. and Guatemalan governments had agreed, this foreign-born judge, Sparkle Sugnanan, actually ordered the children deported from their flights home, separating them from their families in Guatemala by force of federal law. This is the same foreign-born, current citizen of Trinidad Tobago who was raised to the federal bench. Guess when? Of course, by Biden. Guess when she was raised to the federal bench? January 2nd of this year, 2025, a month after Trump was reelected as the 47th president of the United States, and less than 3 weeks before he was sworn in. Of course, as a judge on the D.C. Circuit, Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkles, Sugnanan, has also overseen other lawfare cases against Trump. You remember the firing cases with Kathy Harris and Gwynne Wilcox? Trump fired them from their government jobs and they sued. Well, guess whose court they ended up in? Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkle Sugnanan, who issued injunctions against the president left and right, putting these people back in office, forcing the Article 2 elected president of the United States to delegate his executive authority, the executive authority that the U.S. Constitution grants exclusively and entirely to the Article 2 executive branch president we, the American people, elect to carry out our political will. But as usual, these insane federal judges think their jurisdiction and authority is infinite. Nothing can be done without their approval. Everything is subject to their veto. These unelected black-robed, tyrannical, inferior federal district trial court judges. She's wildly conflicted on these immigration cases in particular because her husband, and therefore her personal household finances, are dependent upon his work as an illegal immigrant advocate and lawyer. That's how he makes his money, by fighting the deportation of illegal migrants from America. And yet she is presiding over these cases. Obviously, all of this misconduct, all of this malfeasance demands impeachment. Unbelievable. Unfortunately, it's not just her. Let's focus on her. Let's start with this. These poor children. Democrat judges opposed child separation from parents and family before they supported it. Whatever is contrary to Trump's will is what they will advance. Foreign-born Biden judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkles, Sugnanan, is blocking the Trump administration's effort to return 600 migrant children brought to the U.S. illegally, trafficked as children. And we all know what happens to those children when they're used as tools to traffic adults over the border. Those children are abused in ways I cannot even describe without being demonetized on YouTube. These horrifically abused and traumatized children, resecured from where they were being hidden by the traffickers in America, resecured, brought to safety by Trump's administration, reconnected with their family in Guatemala, arrangements made to return them at last to their homes. And this piece of human trash orders them deported from the flights they were on. Can you imagine? Let's take a look at what Politico, that deep left news reporting agency has to say about this. How do they describe it? Judge blocks flights sending hundreds of children back to Guatemala. The judge said, I have the government attempting to remove minor children from the country in the wee hours of the morning on a holiday weekend. I'm sorry. Does a holiday weekend mean the government doesn't operate? A holiday weekend. Suddenly all law is suspended? Not this judge's law. A federal judge. Oh, it just happens to be Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkles, Sugnanan, a citizen of Trinidad Tobago, ordered an emergency halt to a plan by the elected Article 2 executive, elected by the whole of the American people to carry out our political will, halted his plan to send more than 600 Guatemalan children back to their home country. They say unaccompanied. Well, they were unaccompanied when they were human trafficked into America, or they were accompanied by traffickers. They make it sound like there's no adults on this flight. Like there's no one on the Guatemalan end to receive them. This is all by arrangement with the Guatemalan government. To return, they say to send more than 600 Guatemalan children. How about to return them to their home country? After immigrant advocacy groups, this is the husband of the judge. That's what he does. He's an immigrant advocate. They sued, calling the unannounced plan illegal. First of all, why would Trump have to announce the plan? And who would he announce it to? Is there a legal obligation for Trump to, just in case anybody wants to veto him, he has to announce it to the immigrant advocacy groups? U.S. District Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkles, Sugnanan, issued the order just after 4 a.m. Sunday. You think it's normal for judges, for federal courts to be operating at 4 a.m. on a Sunday? Finding that the exigent circumstances described in the lawsuit warranted immediate action to maintain the status quo, keeping these children separated from their families. These children at this moment would have been returned, would be in their homes in Guatemala instead of in U.S. federal custody. The judge, a Biden appointee, when was she appointed? When was she raised to the federal bench? January 2nd of this year, a month after Trump's reelection as the 47th president and 3 weeks before he was sworn in. By the way, by like a 50-47 vote, the skin of her Trinidadian teeth. The judge, a Biden appointee, initially scheduled a virtual hearing on the matter for 3 p.m. Sunday, but later moved up the hearing to 12:30 p.m. after being notified some minors were in the process of being removed from the United States. She writes, I have the government attempting to return minor children from the country to their home nation in the wee hours of the morning on a holiday weekend, which is surprising, but here we are. You know what's surprising? That we have as a federal judge, a woman not born in the United States with dual citizenship, not even a fully committed American citizen. That's what's surprising to me. Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkle, Sugnanans, also said, I have conflicting narratives from both sides here. It doesn't quite line up with what I'm getting from the government. Well, if there's one thing we know for sure, if progressives' mouths are moving, if these immigration advocates' mouths are moving, they're lying. It's all they do. If progressives didn't have lies to tell, they would have nothing to say at all. The roughly 600 children arrived in the United States alone. Does anybody believe that? Does anybody believe a bunch of children walked from Guatemala to the Mexican border? Obviously, they were used for human trafficking. Because the Biden administration and the Obama administration had long established that as long as you show up with a child, we're going to let you in. So all these third world savages grabbed children. You know, when DNA tests were done to determine in the first Trump administration whether these kids were actually any relation to the people claiming to be their parents, there were none. They're all kidnapped, abused, traumatized, trafficked children that this judge will not allow to be returned home. They're currently in the custody of the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement, going home. According to lawyers for the children, you think these children chose these lawyers? You know, all these children had asked to be returned to Guatemala, every single one of them, all 600, and Guatemala had agreed to take them. The administration is preparing to send them back to Guatemala without notice. Notice to who? Who's supposed to be notified? Is the entire globe required to be notified before we can return children home? Or a chance to contest their deportation? Every one of these children had asked to be returned to Guatemala. The attorneys say the Trump administration has described the deportation effort as part of a first-of-its-kind pilot program in cooperation with the Guatemalan government. You'd think we were airdropping these kids over Guatemala. This was all arranged as a matter of foreign affairs, squarely within the jurisdiction, the Article 2 authority of the president, in the context of immigration, where Congress has stripped immigration authority from the federal district courts, like the court of Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkles, Suknanans. Justice Department Attorney Drew Ensign disputed that the transfer of children constituted deportations at all, but would actually be reunifications of the children and their parents. These are not removals under the immigration law. They are repatriations. It's outrageous that these lawyers, these immigration lawyers, are trying to interfere with the reunification of these children with their parents. During the hearing, Ensign, Department of Justice, said the planes involved were currently on the ground. One may have taken off, returned to the U.S. with children on board. He said the effort was a result of extensive discussions with the Guatemalan government, foreign affairs, in which the federal courts play zero role, which confirmed the parents' desire to get their children back. Imagine if you were a Guatemalan parent and your little child was stolen from you, to be human trafficked, to be raped, to be traumatized, and somehow, by a miracle, was not left dead in the Mexican desert, was smuggled into the U.S., and then recovered by the Trump administration. Safe, you got that call. We found your kid. She's alive, in bad shape, but she's alive. Would you like her back? And you say yes. And Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkles, Suknanan, says, sorry, you can't have her. You can't have her. I know she's on a plane. Within a couple of hours, she'll be in your arms, in your home. But I say, as an unelected black robe tyrannical inferior district trial court judge, that you may not have your child back. I'm ordering her off that plane. Department of Justice says all these children have parents or guardians in Guatemala who have requested their return. But immigrant rights advocates says that wasn't true in at least some of the cases. So even if they're not lying, and we know they're lying, if it's not true in at least some of the cases, why don't you identify those some and take them off the plane? Why do all 600 children be denied reuniting with their families, with their parents, with their guardians? There are many children who do not meet the criteria Mr. Ensign described, said Efren Olivares of the National Immigration Law Center. How many? Out of 600, how many? Efren? The children who filed the lawsuit, obviously the children didn't file the lawsuit, these immigration advocates did, range in age from 10 to 17 years old. In addition to 2 identified only as minors. Sugnanan's initial order covered only 10 children, but of course you had to expand it from 10 to all 600. The lawsuit was filed at 1 a.m. on Sunday. You think they had to get Judge Sparkle of the Trinidad Sparkles, Suknanan, out of bed? Or you think she was waiting for this filing? You think this wasn't coordinated? All unaccompanied children, regardless of the circumstances of their arrival in the United States, receive the benefit of full immigration proceedings. They don't need immigration proceedings if they're volunteering to go home. That's not an immigration matter. There's no deportation happening. This is akin to Judge James Boasberg. Remember when he ordered, same DC circuit, by the way, he ordered the flights with the TDA terrorists on them turned around in international airspace? Remember that guy? This is the same DC circuit with Judge Amir Ali, who ordered the Trump administration to spend billions of dollars in USAID funding, prohibiting the administration from first checking for waste, fraud, and abuse. The same USAID that now is completely defunct. By the way, when I look at this docket, you know what the docket is, right? The docket is the record of proceedings in court. Folks, anyone who's done any legal work ever, especially in the federal courts, know that these things progress through the court system in a painstaking process. Very time-consuming. Look at all these entries. August 31st, August 31st, August 31st, 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 31st. Motion for temporary restraining order. Notice Minute order. Minute order. Minute order. Minute order. Summons to Christine Ohm. Summons Department of Homeland Security. Summons Todd Lyons. Summons to ICE. Summons to RFK Jr. Health and Human Services. Office of Refugee Settlement. Pam Bondi. Department of Justice. Marco Rubio. Department of State. U.S. Attorney's Office for District of Columbia. Who the F does this judge think she is? Who elected her? Absolutely contemptible. Became a judge on January 2nd of this year. Zero judicial experience. A citizen of Trinidad and Tobago is ordering about our Article 2 branch of government as if they were mere clerks in her court in a case where she has no legitimate jurisdiction.